do a review of all your competitors first. If you solely focus on what things cost and how to save money, you're eventually going to cost yourself out of business.
Of course.
Because you're not staying up with the modern day times.
Whatever you do, make sure you have an objective that you know what the end goal is, and then work backwards. For restaurants, they have to adapt into these changes. They have to adapt to these changes. They have to start picking up the technology stack, and they have to give their employees the tools that they need to be successful. So today we're going to be reviewing the whole notion of thin margins. We're honored to have Kendall Ware. He has led 6 different brands across 3 different industries, and most recently was the president of Cinnabon and Carvel, running 2,000 locations globally. So Kendall, we want to talk about thin margins, and a lot of restaurants are complaining that they have thin margins. Personally, from everything that I'm looking at, we've done some numbers and everything, and it seems like the underlying cause of the thin margins is not really that they have thin margins, because you go into a restaurant, the drinks are marked up several 100%. You know, their least profitable item, their food is marked at least 3 times. So everything that they're selling it at great margins. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're always saying, oh, well, we have thin margins. We can't afford to do this. We can't afford to do that. Why? Because we have thin margins. So they're always afraid to spend money because of that whole notion. So today we want to kind of go through the concept of why they have thin margins and drill down into that. So you've obviously ran a lot of restaurants. You're very well seasoned, experience in the operation, the franchising, and not just smaller locations, you know, obviously from smaller ones all the way up to 2,000 locations globally. So give us your take initially on that.
Sure. I think every business has small margins, right? Thin margins, because everyone's trying to figure out a way to make the most money possible, right? So regardless of the business type or regardless of what we're going after, the margins are going to be perceived as thin. But on average, people are trying to hit that, let's say 20% mark, bottom line, right? That's like the target for most restaurant companies, is to at least get that 20%. How they get there is the question. Sometimes people are focusing solely on eliminating cost or trying to find ways to save versus driving the top line revenue, which typically resolves all the other issues that you may have.
Yeah, I agree.
So are margins thin? Sure, but find me a business where there's not thin margins.
Sure.
But I don't think that's the issue. If you look at most restaurants and how they structured their menu, in most cases, every menu item is going to be a profitable item. So what's really not producing the margin they want? Is it the products and menu items they have, or is it just a lack of top line that's preventing them from achieving that?
I think that's actually a great point, because National Restaurant Association did a survey, and in that survey they found that majority of the restaurants on average are doing $659,000 a year in sales.
Yeah.
And back to your point, obviously you've been across 3 different industries, so not just restaurants, but I believe the same applies to any business. So if you start a business and your top line revenue is $659,000 a year, you're going to have thin margins.
Right.
But I've never spoken to a restaurant owner who's doing $1.5, $2 million, and they're complaining, oh, we have thin margins.
Right.
So I think, to your point, it's driving top line revenue to get you to your profit margins. And in fact, we actually did some numbers. A restaurant that does $650,000 a year, if you assume a 30% food cost and a 30% labor cost, $110,000 in rent, utilities, and then repairs expenses, you deduct all of that out, they're at $57,000 or 8.7% margins.
Right.
So that is, again, and that's a restaurant doing $650,000. But if you take that restaurant, increase their sales to $1 million a year, now you increase your food costs from $195,000 to $300,000. You increase your labor to $300,000, but your rent, utilities, repairs, all that stays at $110,000, $50,000, $25,000, and $18,000 respectively. However, your profit margin, that's the highlight, went from 8.7% to 19.7%.
And there's that desired 20%.
There you go.
Right.
And now you're making $197,000. I think one thing is, they're going in, they're investing $500,000 and they're making $57,000 a year.
Right.
It's like, well, you could have just gone to Olive Garden, gotten a job as a manager, not invest $500,000 to make a $57,000 a year salary, right? Quote unquote self-employed.
Right.
So I think that's the whole topic, is getting the sales and revenues to a desirable phase where you're actually making margins.
Right.
So where have you, obviously there are a lot of people are going after cost savings, etc., but kind of run us through the restaurants that you've operated. How were your margins broken down? And then where did you find that tipping point where you went from thin margins to great margins?
Yeah, it always depends upon the brand, right? If we were talking like a specialty concept, like let's say in the frozen yogurt industry, $500,000 a year is actually fairly good, right? You can make money out of that in that model. Now, if you're a full service restaurant doing $500,000 a year, you're probably struggling.
You're right.
And so it all depends upon the type of business that it is and what day parts and occasions it provides for guests to come and visit. But when you look at the let's just say that 20% margin, or even if it's 10, when you get to a point to actually know your business, you have to look at what is driving that revenue to begin with. What are the items that are selling? What's not selling? How much are you wasting each and every single week? Like, you have to optimize your own menu to even hit these profitable numbers, right? So over time, you may start generating, let's say 10%, or maybe it is only 8%, but where can you optimize? Not necessarily cut costs, but where can you optimize on the menu side of this? Where brands really succeed are the ones who study their menu, understand what is selling, what's not, and what are they keeping in the back of house at all times that typically is being wasted because of expiration, because they don't have enough to move. So I look at, there's cost cutting and elimination, but there's also optimizing. Cost cutting is just trying to save every penny and work every deal and do what you can. But on the optimization side, how can you optimize recipes? How can you optimize the products, the menu? But really study that. And I think that can make a huge impact.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a great point, because me personally, obviously I'm a business owner myself. I'm always looking at ways to increase revenue than save costs, because there's a limit to how much money I can save. Yep. But there's unlimited growth that I can always increase sales from one channel, another channel. And even in a restaurant, you could add online ordering, you could add third-party delivery, you could implement a CDP platform, do effective, individualized, personalized marketing to increase sales and revenue that way. There's so many different ways, but I think restaurants right now are at this tipping point of really embracing technology, and I don't think they've done that well enough now. Obviously, the pandemic pushed a lot of restaurants to start realizing, all right, what do we need to do, and has fast-paced that. But what's your take on effective way? So we've already obviously covered the thin margins. So the thin margins, were in agreement that it's not because they're
it's not the restaurant industry.
Exactly.
It's everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the problem is lack of sales. So how do we increase sales? So in a restaurant, what were the metrics that you guys used to increase sales?
Yeah. So there's several factors, right? And you can take this to the old school approach of just being active in the communities, building up that brand name and your name in conjunction with that. But when you look at technology today, that's where the biggest gap is, right? You could buy a business today with no technology, and whatever they're doing in revenue, you could probably double it after acquiring and adding technology, right? That's happened over and over and over again. Plus having a good operator, hands-on, it changes the game. But if you go past some of the, I would say, the normal assumptions of how to grow a restaurant, just look at the technology access you have today. Where restaurants are making mistakes is they are focusing on what they've always done, not how the world is operating today. And everything that we used to do before the pandemic may have made sense to our brand or to us, but after the pandemic, everything has changed, from consumer behaviors to how things are priced and just what the overall expectation is of a restaurant. I look back in my past where I led a brand that was, call it a globally recognized brand, and they didn't have loyalty app. They didn't have any technology that was driving additional revenue or trying to reach out to their consumers, to their guests, because they've always done so well. But after the pandemic hit, you had no other option. You had to adapt. You had to be a part of third-party delivery. You had to create your own first-party delivery. You had to have a loyalty app. You had to have more access points, and that started to change that brand for the better. And again, the brand's been around for 35 years, but it still made a huge impact. But I've noticed so many restaurants that they struggle with paying for the technology because they look at the expense that it comes with, not what this technology can bring to my business. And the other thing I would say to any restaurant operator out there, especially those who are at that point where they're trying to figure out how to raise sales, but they're also trying to watch their expenses, all of the consumers, all of the guests, all the people that you serve are getting exposed on a daily basis to other concepts that have this high-end technology,
100%.
and they are being trained as that's an expectation.
That's right.
So if they come to your location and you don't have, let's say, a text to join program, or you don't have a automated wait list or anything that is becoming common, you're going to stand out in a negative way.
Yeah, I agree. So I think a lot of these restaurants are looking at it and they're saying, oh, technology is expensive. But I think what they're failing to realize that it's a return on investment. And I think, and that model has been proven across many industries. Look at Uber, look at Amazon, look at Facebook, just literally any tech company. They are using technology to automate. They're using technology to decrease costs. They're using, more importantly, technology to increase revenue. And without that technology backbone in their businesses, they would never be able to compete, and they would never become these multi-billion-dollar companies that they are today. So,
and I've seen this trend, and I've actually led two brands that this was a part of their culture at the time, but two brands that didn't believe in POS systems.
Oh, wow.
Standard, one-on-one, entry level, how to operate. My first job, I didn't even know there was something before a POS system. That's all I've, But there's brands out there that still operate today that are big franchises that have old school cash registers. And their response is, well, I don't want people to see my information. I don't want the IRS to have more access. I don't want this, I don't want that. Standard things that don't matter in today's world, right?
Of course, yeah. Well, everybody's gonna have access to that data anyway by your purchase history.
But why I bring that up is both these brands I'm thinking of. Actually, there's a third brand if I really think about it. But got all of them converted to POS systems. They're all riding on tech now. But the biggest pushback I would always get from operators is they were so concerned about why they weren't making as much money as they used to back in the 90s, back in the early 2000s, etc. Right? These are long-term franchisees that have had this business for a while. Some were in a brand for 20 years, 30 years, etc. They're complaining about making the same amount of money, and it's because the world around them has evolved.
That's right, and they haven't.
Right? They used to make money having a cash register in front of them, and that was it because people would line up out the door. But now it's so competitive, and there's so much technology that people are adapting to it, and they want to go where they can feel like, oh, this is new, this is modern, this is something I can, be engaged with. And so these same franchisees who are scared of investing in tech are the ones saying we don't make as much money as we used to.
That's
right. So how do we increase that? We have to go after the tech. You have to invest to get a return to grow that business. And it just scares people for some reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, in 2000s, you didn't have a cell phone with you in your pocket that you just went to Google Maps or Apple Maps and said, best Mexican restaurant around me, right? So you relied aggressively on the local. So you were doing yellow pages or things that all these young kids don't even know what it is. They probably never seen a yellow pages, right? So now you're right that the whole industry around them, the whole environment has changed, and they failed to adapt. And now they're slowly going out. Think of Netflix versus Blockbuster. They failed to adopt, and because of that failure of adoption, they went out of business. So those franchisees will eventually go out of business because, again, everybody else is stealing those customers. And I think I agree 100% that if they continue to be oblivious to the fact that this is going to be a game changer, we haven't even gotten started in technology yet. You've got other industries like right now with automations and workflow automations, machine learning, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT is just killing it right now. So if you haven't even adopted the basics, if you don't know who your customers are, and if you're not doing anything in technology, then you're already out of business, because this ChatGPT has proven that those who embrace those technologies are going to stand out. So now you're not getting the customers, because the next door guy is stealing all those customers because they're communicating more effectively with that customer. So now, your baby boomers, they're still coming in, but now majority of your customer visitors are these younger generations that have grown up with technology.
Right.
So they're the ones who are paying you to stay in business. They're the ones who are spending money with you.
Right. And you need obviously great people on your team to be able to deliver what these technologies can provide.
Of course.
And that's another example where so many people are talking about how it's hard to find good people or it's hard to keep people, but a lot of them don't have basic one-on-one technologies like a e-learning platform or LMS, something that makes the experience a little bit more seamless. And so all these things that technology drives benefit your business. And if I was a business owner who had an old school restaurant today, I would be thinking about what my valuation is going to be the day I'm ready to cash out, the day I'm ready to sell. Yeah. And if they don't add technology, it's going to be very difficult to sell that business for a desired, for a desired multiple, right? And that's the other thing is if I was going to buy that business and I realize, oh, wow, if I buy it, I have to invest so many more thousands of dollars to get it open just to have basic technology, that's going to be a red flag to me. Otherwise, I could be the owner and I could add all these services and then sell it for a higher multiple.
And I think actually to that point, I think a business, if you're trying to exit, a business that doesn't know their customers, a business that doesn't have any tech stack in there, is just not going to be valued as much.
Right.
Because, well, think of it. Why is Netflix or why is Uber or why are these companies worth billions and billions when the hotel industry is not, or the taxi companies are not? Well, it's because they have all the customer data. So I think the valuation will obviously go up because of the tech stack, but it's interesting that again they're still kind of lagging behind that idea, and they're still trying to figure out why they're not making the sales. You know, why are they suffering? Because again, they failed to make those investments. So I think that'd be a good way. And go back to that employee thing. I really think that you're trying to hire staff. You're not giving them the tools to be successful, and you're complaining that, oh, well, I can't find people.
Right.
Well, they come in, they work for a couple of months, and it's like, wow, this is a mess. Like, I don't know how to do my job. I don't have an e-learning platform to learn how my job should be done. That's a whole new can of worms because, you know, you open a restaurant, you hire 50 people. 6 months later, it's down to 25. A year later, it's down to 10. And then the training that got conveyed from the first employees to the second to the third, now by the time it's on the fourth generation of employee in there, because of turnover, now it's not even water, it's you know, lemon juice. It just completely changes.
It's tough, man, because for a lot of people right now, they think that these technologies are new. These technologies are not new whatsoever, right? These technologies have been around for a very long time. I mean, my first job, I was 16 years old, bussing tables, and I had an automated scheduling platform.
Oh, wow.
Like that is how I came into the industry. So when I hear
15 years ago, and
I hear about paper schedules and paper, it's just like enough's enough. If that's how it was way back then, how are we not there yet as an industry?
That's right.
And so I think there's plenty of opportunity there, but a lot of it is the education piece, which is why things like this are attractive to me, because we get to educate and share more thoughts out there. And I hope a lot of restaurant operators consume this. But it also depends upon if you are a part of a franchise or if you're an independent. If you're independent, sure, it's going to be tough to get the best buying power. It's going to be tough to get that, you know, I guess, valuable market basket.
But what's the alternative? You don't do it and you got to
drive the revenue. Exactly. You got to figure out how to drive revenue and what can you invest in that can accomplish that. I mean, just look at things like third-party delivery. Even if they are taking a little bit more of your margin, you're most likely driving more revenue, or you're reaching a consumer that you did not have access to because it is also a walking billboard. You're scrolling and seeing brand names in your area that maybe you've never even seen before. But now it's giving you that opportunity to have that transaction, right? To gain another guest, gain another follower. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not on there because it costs too much. But this whole mentality of what things cost, it can go negative. I mean, if you think about it, if you solely focus on what things cost and how to save money, you're eventually going to cost yourself out of business.
Of course.
Because you're not staying up with the modern day times.
Yeah, actually, so we were talking before this that, you know, if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, if I give you a check for 12 grand, or if you have to write me a check for 12 grand, you're going to buy this application, it's going to cost you $12,000, but it's going to bring in 100,000 worth of revenue.
Right.
I think majority of the restaurants, majority of the business owners will turn around and say, can you do it for 10?
Right.
Me personally, I would say, what if I write you a check for 24,000?
Right. What does that get me?
Can I get 200 grand in increase revenue?
Right.
And I think that's where they're falling short, is they're focused so much on saving money that they get blindsided to the whole other side of sales revenue, and then they're complaining thin margins.
Right.
So I think so. It sounds like we're on the same page on that too. Training employees. If you're in a restaurant, then a server walks up, instead of saying things you could do now. So you could go to your employees, like we're here in a restaurant doing a podcast. These guys have amazing fresh squeezed orange juice. So instead of coming up and saying, what would you like to drink? Or worse yet, what do you want to drink? Then saying, would you like to have a cup of fresh squeezed orange juice or a coffee? So that immediately upsells and increases that average check.
Absolutely.
And I think the restaurants need to really focus on, how do I increase my PPA, my per person average, or my average check size, and how do I get that customer to come in one extra visit? And by the way, we did a whole bunch of numbers for a brand that we were doing a presentation. If you took 15% of their customers and you bumped them up to the next level of frequency. So if you come in once a year, if I have you come in twice a year because of my technology, because of whatever tools I'm using to get you back in, that will automatically lead to a $64,000 increase in that year. If that person comes in, instead of twice, come in 3 times, you're at $165,000 a year in additional revenue for that location. And if you make it into a third visit, you had like $274,000 a year in revenue increase. So there's a huge difference between the frequency of visit and then it's very much proportional to getting that revenue increase. And then obviously more efficient use of marketing funds. Right now, there's a lot of restaurants, even today, now in 2023, that are sending kids it free. And they're sending it to all their customers, regardless whether they have kids or not. 12 years ago, I was working, actually you and I met at that brand. So
I still get that email. It makes sense to me now, but it didn't back then.
Well, you have kids now. Back then you didn't have
the first 10 years I did not. But they still sent you, they sent you kids a free offer for past 13, 14 years. And not only in the last 3 years, it made sense. So, actually, they kept sending me kids it free, and I always used to tell their CMO, it's like, I don't have kids, but you're still sending me that kids it free offer. So it was never personalized. It was
never personalized. And it's doing two things. I unsubscribe because it's like, I don't have kids. These are not relevant, right? And then 2, you're wasting your marketing resources. So now, again, going back to that thin margin, you're spending money when you shouldn't be spending it, and now that's burning your marketing fund, which then doesn't allow you to maximize your return on investment profits. And I think the last thing that is, it seems like I was at FS Tech in 2021, 2022, and a lot of conversations around customer data platforms and knowing your customers. It's astonishing that in the restaurant space, you could go to small brand. At FS Tech, there was a CMO of a large brand with 400 locations. They were saying the same thing. Hey, today in 2022, we're still sending kids it free offers to all of our customers. So for me, that resonates, because it's like, why would you do that? Why would you burn that cash? Why would you not personalize it and not do that? Because they don't have that information, So I think this customer data platform notion is going to be a big game changer.
Market to me based upon the things that I purchase. What do I like to consume? Why do I come to visit you? That's what I want to get deals for, Otherwise, I'm not going to care if you're offering me something that I have no interest in.
Sending steak special to a vegetarian. Kids it free offer to those who don't have kids, or alcohol specials to those who don't drink. I think that's a huge revenue generator there. I want to touch base on one other thing. So we talked about going from revenues of $650,000, making 8.7% margin, to $1 million, making 19% margins. And I think one other thing that we haven't touched base on, we actually did this comparison for that brand. So if you go from $1 million and you increase your sales by 15%, $150,000 a year, that difference is going to go from making 19% to 26% in margins. It's going to take you from making $200,000 a year to $302,000 a year.
It's a game changer.
It's an absolute game changer.
And it comes down to investing in the right technologies that can drive traffic, and investing in the right people who can execute it. And you go back to the whole talk about team members. Little things can make a huge difference, And on the upselling point, even if you don't have that many upsell opportunities, let's just say you're very flat menu. if the team members are still trained to educate guests on what all you have to offer, and whatever they got this time, recommend something different for the next time.
Sure.
You keep planting seeds, right? You keep educating that guest, and they will find more reasons to visit you more often. That's what it comes down to. But I've always said this, but you can't just hire somebody in the restaurant business who just wants to ring somebody up on a cash register. You just can't do it. It has to be somebody who loves hospitality, loves being in front of people, knows how to make eye contact, shake hands, kiss the babies, all the things that drive people back into that restaurant.
Yep.
So it has to be somebody who is a salesperson, who's naturally good and understands that I want to sell more out of this business to help this business obviously sustain longer and to provide more jobs. So I think sometimes you get desperate, so you just hire somebody and they ring people up, but that's not what you need. Ringing people up is automated these days. You don't need to do that. You need someone who can actually educate and sell and show them more reasons to visit.
Absolutely. And I think that if you can increase the frequency of visit by doing exactly that, planting a seed so they don't always come in for that same dish, because you can't keep going in and you can't continuously sell. Come into a restaurant and always order the same thing and eat the same thing, and you're not going to do that 5 days a week.
Right.
It's not like an airline where you could travel from coast to coast and go American all the way. Right. You're not going to add, if you have 3 stops, you're not going to eat McDonald's for all 3 stops. Right. But if you have a way to give them a reason to try different dishes, make recommendations, do those personalization. I think I agree, and we already talked about it. Going from 1 visit to 2 visits to 3 visits a year. Additionally, a year. We're not talking a month.
Right.
So again, if you can bring in a customer that visits you, once a year to 4 times a year, you're already up over $250,000, $275,000 that year from that 15% of that customer. So there's a huge impact that is there.
Sure.
And I think for restaurants, they have to adapt into these changes. They have to adapt to these changes. They have to start picking up these technology stacks, and they have to give their employees the tools that they need to be successful.
Right.
So if I walk in and you've got an hour wait and I give you my phone number, you see that I'm a loyalty member and I spent $15,000 with a brand in the course of last year or 2, then I shouldn't have to wait an hour like everybody else. Right. So that treatment needs to be special. And by the way, if you see that I have a peanut allergy, then you could make a note of it and say, "Hi, Mr. Ware, I noticed you have a peanut allergy. Don't worry, I'm gonna let the server and the chef know, and they'll be aware of it." Right. So elevating those experiences, creating those memorable experiences is going to make a huge impact.
That's what it comes down to. So yes, everybody has thin margins, but to offset that in today's world, you have to invest in technology. That's the first solution, and you got to focus on driving that top line revenue. That's
training
really
employees, giving them the right tools to be able to do that.
Right.
And actually, one other study I was looking at, they said if a customer is happy, they'll refer you 33% of the time.
Right.
If they're very happy, they'll refer you 60%. But if you surprise the guest, that customer, they'll refer you 90% of the time.
Right.
So I think that will play out to, again, surprising them and say, "Oh yeah, we know you have a peanut allergy," right? Or elevating that experience is going to make a huge impact. Then they're more likely to leave you a 5-star review.
Right.
And that's another topic, because if your reviews are less than 4, if it's 3.9, everybody else is over 4.
Right.
So guess what? You're not going to attract that new customer. So.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. So a lot of great topics. We'll drill down into the customer data platform on our next episode. So stay tuned for that. There's a lot of information that we discussed. Hopefully you guys found that information helpful. Any closing notes from you, Mr. Kendall?
I think it was a great
discussion. Give them one thing
that
they could do, one thing that a restaurant can do to immediately make an impact and start getting on that right trajectory.
I would say do a review of all your competitors first. In your space, who does what you do? One, identify what makes you stand out from that group, but then find out what's making them stand out from you. Own what you're already really good at, but then go invest in those technologies that most likely these other competitors have. And if they don't, even more reason for you to go invest in that technology. Whatever can drive traffic and visibility to your brand, even if you don't initially see the return, right? A lot of times people invest in technologies that basically provide more visibility to your brand, and they don't see the direct correlation to the sales right away because it takes time. But as long as you're getting your brand in front of more eyeballs, it's going to lead to more reasons for a guest to visit your location. And over time, you'll start to see that compounding effect. But I would just figure out what is it that you need to drive more traffic to your business and go invest in that technology.
And I think I'll add a little bit of an addition to that. Don't invest and don't consider the technology to be an expense. If that technology doesn't have a return on investment built into it, then don't invest in it. You don't want those tools to be, you don't want them to just be there and give you that information.
Right.
I say, a lot of people say knowledge is power. I say, no, knowledge is absolutely useless, because if you don't know what to do with it, then it's pointless.
Right.
In your space, in the restaurant space, you have to have transactional data of the customers, but more importantly, it has to be actionable. So whatever you do, make sure you have an objective that you know what the end goal is, and then work backwards.
Right.
Actionable transactional data, an actionable CDP, something that you can actually utilize to build on that return on investment idea and be able to actually, again, get something back. And it's not about the cost. Somebody may charge you less, give you a point of sale system. Somebody else may give you a point of sale system that increases your revenue, but they're 50% more expensive.
Right.
You should still consider that difference, and that 50% more should justify you paying for that, as long as it's bringing more revenue.
You don't want to invest in just simply collecting data. That's not the point, right? You got to do something with that information.
Data by itself is useless.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and thanks for being here again. Here at Milagro, we've solved all of these complex problems of the loyalty and the integration and everything that we've discussed in this podcast. So if you're interested to learn more, contact us and schedule a demo.